Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Andres Groves. I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Matthew Merrett. Matt, back from Mexico. How are you feeling about the Jets right now?
All good, my man. It's a nice little holiday I had. Bit of sunshine, couple of margaritas, enjoying a bit of nice weather. So yeah, it was good. I'm now back into the swing of things. Come back and there's not much going on with the Jets at the moment.
No,
not much going on across all sports because obviously the Chelsea season's over.
Oh, you had to bring up Chelsea. I tried to jump in with the Jets straight away just to nip the Chelsea thing in the bud because I'm sure
we've got a big semi-final for Harlequins this weekend, travelling up to North London to play Saracens. So hopefully the Quins go well. But apart from that, there's not much going on. So we're just waiting for the season, occupying ourselves with clips from OTAs, seeing what the latest is. Just chilling really. This is that nice little downtime in the NFL season where there's not much going on, so you can just kind of chill out, see who's fighting over what on Twitter, because Twitter is just full of pointless conversations, isn't it? Your man throws an interception at one training camp and suddenly 5 other fan bases are piling in.
Yeah.
And it's fine and it's all good. All of these OTA chats, like they're good and interesting at the moment, but they'll all be forgotten about as soon as the actual season starts. So they're worth following and worth seeing.
Even training camp, right? As soon as training camp starts, that stuff's going to take over in terms of what happens in that period. Yeah. I think it's just with staff for content. We want content. We want things that we want to see our team when the season's such a short actual season and the off season's so long, especially when you get past the 2 acquisition events, it's kind of you get to this point you're like, we want to see the new guys mixed together. We've seen that now in terms of the new guys and the rookies and the team and the guys who were here last year and the years before all mixing together. That's nice. We're now past that novelty, so now it's really down to it all is mostly just negative because all the positive is like framed with it's just OTAs, right? And all the negative can be going, we don't want to see that in OTAs, but yeah, I think you just have to.
It is what it is. The squad is so big at the moment. I was looking at one of the SNY videos. They had like a little highlights clip, and I spent like 30 seconds watching Michael Pirine take handoffs, and it's just so many people on the roster at the moment that it's impossible to keep up with. So it's good. I think the good news is that most people seem like they're there. Obviously, Mekhi Becton's now back in the building, which we are pleased to see because obviously we're all hoping that he can have a big year, and people have their own opinions on whether he should have been there before now. That's kind of much for muchness. You can make up your own mind of that depending on your thoughts. And I think if you're high on Mekhi Becton, you'll say, no, it's fine. If you're low on Mekhi Becton, you'll say, no, he should have been there. Mm-hmm. It is what it is to some extent. And I think it is good that him and Fanto in the building, because those are probably the offensive question marks for Zach Wilson. And that's obviously our season will and the AFC East will kind of go as the quarterbacks play. So the more we can do to help Zach Wilson and get those left tackle, right tackle slots sorted is better, and the more reps that they can get together in kind of a changing offensive line, because although it's only one new player really, it's still going to be a lot more new combinations on that offensive line. You're going to have 2 new guard tackle pairings because obviously unless Vera Tucker and Fant played next to each other last season, but it sounds like if Fant's on left tackle, then he's got to get used to playing next to Laken. Then Conor McGovern's got to get next to playing between Laken on his left, AVT on his right, and then AVT and Mekhi Becton have to get used to playing together on the right. So the more reps that they can kind of get together and feel together along that offensive line is good. And going back to Mekhi Becton, I think it's good that he's there because stories up and downs, people believe what they want about his weight, how fit he's been, how in shape he is, whatever. He's obviously a big guy, and we had the disappointment last year when we thought we'd get him back, and it just went on and on and on, and never quite got to a position where he was able to take snaps. But we do want to see him get ideally 17 games this season. I don't know if he's really the type of build that you're ever going to get like DeBrickashaw, Ferguson type longevity out of.
No,
but I think get him back on the field, get him going, and see what you got. Because if Mekhi Becton has a down season, I think you can start penciling in an offensive tackle for the first round pick next year.
Yeah, it's a pivotal season for him. I don't think at this point I think his rookie season was fine. It was good. I think it obviously it's a rookie season. It's not going to be perfect. And then last season was what it was. So it's not that he's disappointed necessarily. It's been disappointing, but not really necessarily due to him on the field. Obviously, we know apparently his weight ballooned when he got the knee injury and he wasn't playing. I mean, that's gonna happen if a big man like that can't train and he's but. He looks in good shape now from what you've seen. We'll see what happens when he gets to camp, into the mandatory camp. Shortly, we'll see what he looks like and see how he moves around. And hopefully, it's the start of him really kind of setting forward for a positive season. He's been really positive in terms of online. Really kind of excited. Lots of comments and quote tweeting the Jets videos and getting excited for the season. So there's enthusiasm from his part. So that's good. That hopefully that motivates him to.
It'll be interesting to see because obviously he hasn't spoken to the media since before last season because he kind of went out to that first game and then wasn't made available at the end of the season. So I'm sure there'll be that first interview he does. I think will be really, really interesting just to see where his headspace is at and kind of once the media kind of can talk to him about his process back from injury, how he's feeling, how he's thinking right now. I think that'll be really good to see. But as we all know, he's only as good as he is when he's on the field. So hopefully we see him on lots of snaps on either the right or left side of this line next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think either way, whether he's paired with Laken or with AVT, I think it's going to be very. If he's fit and paired with one of those two, the running game behind him, that pairing, especially, Fant's a really good player, but he's not obviously as strong in terms of the run blocking as Mackay. And if on whatever side Mackay's on, that's going to be just bulldoze the line on that side, and it's going to be really fun for Hall and for Michael Carter and Coleman to run behind. But yeah, this is where we're in the chat about Mackay Becton returning, and this is exactly where we're at in terms of the season. We're waiting on the mandatory camp. I think that's the first part where you really see some of a little bit more meaningful stuff, and then obviously we have that break towards the summer camp, the training camp. So we will see how that goes. But yeah, anyway, on this week's show, we'll be tackling the next positional group on our rankings. We've thought that the third worst group is the interior defensive line. So
I don't. I think it's the worst.
You think it's the worst? Interesting. That's an interesting take, isn't it? Because we've all had. I thought safeties was worse. David thought linebackers was worse, and obviously because I run the show, I put safeties first. So that's how it works. And you were in Mexico anyway, so you weren't here to talk about it. But it'd be interesting to see. You think it's actually the worst group that we have. So. Interesting take. We'll have that coming to kind of finish the show, but actually we're just going to go to a little chat that I had. That I had kind of a chat with him yesterday with Matt O'Leary, the Jets content creator. I had a little bit of a chat with him, so we're going to head to that first, and then after me and Matt will be back to talk about the interior defensive line. So yeah, over to me and Matt now. Okay, so I'm joined by Matt O'Leary, who's on his second appearance in the show. He came on last year and he's back again to talk things in Jets football into 2022. Matt, thanks for joining us on the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me on.
No, it's really, really good to touch base again. What's your general, just jumping straight into it, what's your general thoughts of the off-season that the Jets have had coming off that first year of this regime?
Yeah, I was really impressed, I think, like most Jet fans were, with this offseason, with both their plan in free agency and then what they were able to do in the NFL draft. I think they were able to fill a lot of really key holes on this team, specifically one that jumps out that people talk a lot about, but I don't know if people even talk enough about it, is the tight end room, just completely rebuilding that. I think was a tremendous job from Joe Douglas, and I think he really put his young quarterback in a position to succeed going into year two, which is always the goal.
Yeah, it was just, we speak to a lot of people, it just looks like they hit every, you can't get everything done, but they hit a lot of targets that they needed to get done in the off season. So it's been really positive. It's been a really, really positive off season. What's your favorite move? Maybe one in free agency and one in the draft. What are some of your favorite moves in each of those phases?
So for free agency, I think for me, it's DJ Reed. I think people are sleeping on just how good DJ Reed was last year. And really ever since he moved to the outside. When he was a slot corner, he struggled a little bit at times, but then in Seattle moved to the outside and was really, really good. And I think he's going to be a good running mate for Sauce Gardner. He's still young. He's only 25 years old. So he's someone with NFL experience just entering their prime right now. It's not, someone who's approaching 30 years old, which is, when you start to worry about these cornerbacks or these guys in the secondary starting to fall off. So I think he is going to be a really big impact guy on this defense. And then in the NFL draft, I'm going to cop out and do two answers in one kind of. So I'm going to go Garrett Wilson for my real favorite, but sentimental favorite is Jeremy Ruckert. So for Garrett Wilson, I loved him in the pre-draft process. I thought he was absolutely the number one wide receiver in this draft class. And I think he's going to come in and be good right away. And I think with Sauce Gardner and then the trade up for Jermaine Johnson, he almost feels like the forgotten guy, which is crazy because you took a wide receiver 10th overall, which is something the Jets never do. And for Ruckert, like, I don't know, for me, I live on Long Island, grew up on Long Island, and he's like 20 minutes from where I live. So he's living out literally every Jet fan on Long Island's dream. So it's hard not to root for that guy.
Yeah, it's a great story. It is a great story. And then, and the two guys you highlighted in terms of from the performance angle, Garrett Wilson, a great prospect in the draft. One of the best receivers in the draft. Even if you had different opinions, he certainly brings a lot of quality, and we've already seen some glimpses of it in early. We had the first OTAs, and he mossed a DB. I think it was Hardy on the play. So we're already seeing these things already. These little glimpses of that ability that's showing up. And obviously, DJ Reed, a great addition. I think someone who's flying under the radar, a cheap, really relatively cheap signing, a good cost value to the deal, and and he should bring a really good, combative nature to what we have on the other side with Sauce. So it looks like, when you really think about how they've hit those, improve the wide receiver room, improve the DB room, it's really good. I love those two moves as well, and I do think people are looking at Sauce, and fair enough. But DJ Reed, I think, is going to be the true kind of step up that we need right now, while Sauce kind of gets his feet wet naturally with any cornerback. So, if there is any disappointments of things that didn't happen, or maybe directions they went that you preferred they maybe gone elsewhere in the off season.
So I guess I'll answer this question like this. There's two positional groups where I'm slightly worried about right now, and both come on the defensive side of the ball with linebacker and safety. I was surprised that they didn't take either of those positions in the draft, especially when they had opportunities to, later on, which I can't complain about the draft class overall because I think it was such a tremendous haul, but just came away a little bit surprised. For me, at linebacker, I really like CJ Mosley. Beyond that, I think there's a lot of question marks. They really like Quincy Williams' potential. He was very streaky last year. There are weeks where he looked really, really good, and then there were weeks where his missed tackle rate was through the roof, and he was all over the field in the wrong ways, missing tackles. And at safety, I love the addition of Jordan Whitehead, but LaMarcus Joyner hasn't really played that much in the last 2 years. I don't trust Ashton Davis, and Jason Pinnock was okay, but in a really small sample size, so I don't know if we could go into the year relying on him. So those are really the two positional groups that I'm questioning right now going into the season.
Yeah, they're the two ones that we all look at, I think, as Jets fans. I mean, we have been going through positional groups series in the last few weeks, and the last few weeks have been we've been going from the weakest to the strongest, and we went safety then linebacker. So in the first 2 weeks, those are definitely the weaker groups, and I think we all know that. I think there'll be potentially some moves. In speaking with a lot of people, you get that sense that there's things coming. There's obviously been talk about linebacker specifically with someone like Quan Alexander, but we'll see what happens in terms of any releases from other teams. And I think they're probably Joe Douglas probably sees what we see as well. That's one thing in speaking to people was like, yeah, he seems to see the same thing. It's not some crazy outlandish thing where we see this massive hole and the front office doesn't see it for some reason. They seem to know where they need to improve, and I think they'll probably get some extra bodies in both positions. That's the hope, right? You can't get everything done, but that would really help the defense just solidify the unit in the whole. In terms of the going into the season now, who's a player that you think will be the biggest surprise? I mean, you mentioned DJ Reed potentially being surprised. And I think that's a candidate. Who's another name that potentially could surprise fans this year?
Another one that I'm going to go with is a very polarizing player in Mekhi Becton. I feel like a lot of people either you love him or you hate him. There's not really an in-between, it feels like, with him. But I think there's a group of Jets fans who are really down on him, who forget just how good he was for this team as a rookie. And even if he comes in and plays on the right side instead of left tackle because of how good George Fant was there last year, I think he could be a dominant run blocker on the right side with Elijah Vera Tucker. I think he could be one of the better tackles in the AFC. And I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong this year.
Yeah, I'm a big Mekhi Becton fan, and I think, the rookie season was really good. It was, it's not perfect, but it was a rookie season. You don't expect it to be perfect, but there was some dominant play. And then in the first game, he gets rolled up by GVR, and you're like, he's out for the season. He took longer to heal, fair enough, but it didn't. It's not like he kind of came back and had another niggling injury, or his performance was terrible. So let's see. I'm really hopeful as well, and if he can be dominant with AVT on that right side, then so be it. Put them on the right side and let them go to work on that side. And yeah, I'm all for it. And if that happens, I'll be delighted. Who do you think is going to be maybe a bit of a kind of disappointment in terms of someone maybe a bit of a letdown this season in terms of who you think is getting a bit overhyped maybe by fans?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think in that area, I might go with Sauce Gardner. And that's not to say that Sauce isn't going to be a good player. I think he's going to be very, very good. But I think some people are putting the bar way too high for a rookie corner. Just because I think, everyone looks at the stats. Oh, he didn't allow a touchdown in college. He's obviously the 4th overall pick. So the expectations that for him to be a star right away, and cornerback's not easy. And making that transition from college to the NFL. I mean, even Darrelle Revis, he didn't become Revis until really his 2nd or 3rd year in the league. Yeah. It took him a little while to get going. And I think he could be, solid and steady as a rookie. But I think if you're expecting Sauce to come in and be an absolute star from day one, that's a tall task for me as a rookie corner in this league.
Yeah, I mean, some of even the best cornerbacks that we have, you mentioned Darrelle, but even the ones that we have currently, present day, their first rookie years, they make mistakes and they learn, and that's where they ascend to being elite, is when they can kind of correct those issues. I'm with you. That question in my mind is always going to be with Sauce, because I think it's like a rookie cornerback is going to be there, struggling at times when they face it, especially some of the better receivers they face. They're just not going to have seen that level of quality, and also being, beaten by a real veteran presence, on top of someone who's really excellent, from a player point of view. And I think he'll get seen a few times. It will happen, and people have to understand that. But he's getting hyped so much because everyone's so excited. But the whole, it's the swag. But you're like, he's a mixture of Darrelle and Crow, and you're like, can we just calm down? Can we calm down a bit? I'm with you on that one. That's definitely a real candidate for disappointment. But I still think, like you said, it's going to be pretty good. I think people just need to set the expectations a bit lower. That's all. In terms of the season, Matt, what's your general feelings in terms of where do you see this team? I know ESPN just came out recently with ranking us as the worst team in the NFL. I mean, people have got all. Some people say we're going to go to playoffs. Others, I think it all pins down on what they believe in number 2. But what's your feelings for this team in this season?
Yeah, I think at this point in the rebuilding process, you have to be competitive on a week-to-week basis. Like, I don't want to see games where you're giving up 500 yards of offense and 50 points. Like, there was a stretch last year where it felt like every single week that's what they were giving up. It was just unwatchable football. And the Jets can't be unwatchable this year. They need their second-year quarterback to take a big step forward. They need this young roster to take a big step forward. I think they do. I think you're looking at probably somewhere between 7 and 9 wins. 9 if things go really well. Maybe it's less than 7 if there's some injuries, but 8's kind of the number that I settled on. 8 wins, 9 losses, which is hovering right around 500. And I think, like I said, at this point that you have to start expecting more. I think if it's another season where the Jets are winning 4 or 5 games, that's not good enough.
No. I think we're right there with you in terms of that kind of medium score between 7 and 9 wins. It looks like, I think if anyone's looking at it, I don't think, that we're looking at with green tinted glasses. I do think that you look at the quality in the team, and I think there is obviously some rookie staff and young players, and that probably balances that. But I think, we can probably sneak enough wins to get to 7 at least, if not up to 9. I don't see this kind of prediction that we're one of the worst teams in the league. I think that's just people just seeing Jets equals mess, and it's not. It's like if you look at what JD and Salah are putting together in the last couple of years, they're really starting to put together a decent program here. I am with you on that one. But Matt, thanks a lot for joining us on this one. Is there anything you want to shout out? Any videos that you're doing? Matt's obviously got a great YouTube channel, great presence on multiple platforms as well. Anything that you're doing specifically that you want to shout out?
Yeah, so every week I do podcast episodes of Just Jets. They come out every Monday. We do a call-in segment where people call in and I'll answer questions. On Patreon, I've been doing bonus podcasts where I interview people from all different Jets content creators. We have Green Bean on this week. So if you're interested, Green Bean's the best. I love Green Bean. So if you're interested in that, it's patreon.com/Matt O'Leary NY. And you can follow me on pretty much all social medias at Matt O'Leary NY, talking Jets over there.
Absolutely. Join Matt on that one. But Matt, thanks a lot for joining that. And we'll head back to me and our Matt back on the main show. Okay, so we'd like to thank Matt for jumping on. I had a really good chat with him. Always good to speak to him. Matt.
You've dealt with all of the Matts, haven't you? Last week you had Zazie.
Yeah, exactly. All the Matts. Bring all the Matts. We're in Matt season right now. So interior defensive line. So like we do, most people will go through the projected starters at the line. It's going to rotate, as we know, famously with Olbrich's chat about rotation. They're going to be rotating, but we'll talk about kind of the general guys who are in there, the guys at the back of the roster, maybe guys off the roster right now in free agency who you could look at maybe bringing in as well. So this is an interesting conversation. Probably frame it by in Salah's press conference. On the first day kind of OTAs, he kind of reframed Olbrich's statement about it's not really about 30 to 35, it's about a percentage. And I think Olbrich had a lower percentage of snaps in mind when he gave that number out. I think they say they want to have, like 70% of the kind of each of them are in for 70% of them. So it makes more sense when the way Salah explained it. I think it just helped frame the discussion, but they are going to be rotating, as we know. As they did it last year, they'll do it again. Hopefully they'll find a better balance than last year, where they're not out on key plays without Quinnen, which is what Salah said, like we want him there for key plays. But there's plenty of times where Quinnen was not on the field when key plays were occurring for the other team. So hopefully they kind of find a better balance, and that probably comes down to rookie and kind of head coach, rookie defensive, just making kind of mistakes when it comes to substitutions and stuff. So hopefully they sort that stuff out with a bit of looking back at last year. Matt, what's your feelings about it? I know you said earlier in the show it's the worst unit, and I can push back. Yeah. Well, I'll push back on that a little bit myself, but explain to me why you think it's so bad.
So I think it kind of lives and breathes in two elements. I think the first one is the star player on the interior defensive line, and kind of will be a big part of this unit's success or failures is how high you are on Quinnen Williams. If you think he's a top 10 defensive tackle in the league, do you think he's top 15, top 20? I still find him a hard player to place in terms of rankings because there are too many weeks where I watch the Jets, watch this thing, and he's just invisible. He's not showing up. He's quite hidden, and I think part of that might be because he's playing along a bad defensive line. He's in a bad defense, so it's harder to kind of notice him when there's the less pieces around him. Obviously, we saw him at Alabama, and he was otherworldly at Alabama. He was taking over games, and obviously that's a different thing because you're on an elite defense and you're beating up on smaller schools. Whereas that step to the NFL, I felt like he hasn't quite been able to ever really established that level of dominance and ability to take over a game, and I haven't seen that. So
over consistency, at least, he's had moments, right? But
small flashes,
yeah.
But he's not seen the consistency. The flip side of that is like there are lots of stats which show up in terms of things which don't seem like they make an impact, but they add up, and there's a lot of people who give him a lot of coverage for having these like unique, different stats records, kind of showing up in different facets of the game. So he's out there, he's doing a job. It's just harder to notice him. So I think Quinnen Williams is probably the first reason I'd say that I'm probably will kind of live or fall by putting the defensive line at the bottom of the rankings. The second one is last season we were terrible, horrific, embarrassingly ugly at defending the run. We've lost our best run defender. They haven't brought in someone to replace him, someone to kind of eat up tackles, stop the run. Foley Fatukasi's now playing in Jacksonville. And I know we can talk about the scheme fit and what the coaching staff are looking for, but who in this defensive tackle is going to kind of be that guy who controls the gaps and is able to get those stops at the line of scrimmage? I don't see anyone. I think you've got three very similar kinds of players in Solomon Thomas, Quinnen Williams and Sheldon Rankins, all first-round draft picks who haven't quite lived up to that billing. And then behind them, do you really have anyone who's got you've got Nathan Shepherd.
JFM will kind of come in and out.
He's not a run stopper though.
No, he's not. But he's another guy in the mix.
Yeah, but you got Nathan Shepherd. Jonathan Marshall is an interesting X factor. We can come on to him, and then Tanzel Smart rounding off the depth chart for the defensive tackles. So I think the fact that we haven't seen them be able to stop the run, which is what I think defensive tackles primarily should be able to do, and the fact that the kind of successes are all on someone who we'd all love to see Quinnen Williams play super well on his 5th-year option, but so far he hasn't played like a 3rd overall draft pick. He's been fine, okay, but not great and not like a superstar. And if you're taking someone 3rd overall, you're taking them to be a superstar. So I guess that's kind of my opinions on why I think they're probably the worst group. I think they're down there with linebackers in terms of it's not particularly pretty, and this Jets defense is the polar opposite to how we've seen it done in the past, where they were built up the middle previously with Jamal and Marcus May, and when they brought in Cesar Mosley and David Harris, and all these legends played down the middle, and they never quite got the outside sorted at the edge and corner positions. I think it's almost flipped now, isn't it? The corners and edges we have a lot more confidence in, and it's up the middle where we are particularly wide, and just dreading reliving that Philadelphia Eagles game where they didn't touch the ball. No,
it is a worry. It is a worry. My pushback on the unit, I think the unit from a pass rushing point of view, I think they're good. I think they're pretty good in terms of as interior pass rushers, right? But your worry is about the run, and I think that's why the linebacking crew. I think the more I think about it, the more weeks we go into this, I think David's assumption that the linebackers are the worst unit, it makes sense because you think even the starters are, CJ Mosley's good, question marks even with Quincy, and then behind that even more question marks. And I think that unit causes problems for the defensive line approach. Like if they want guys who are going to kind of be really aggressive, then you need the linebacking unit behind. When you look at that San Francisco defense of 2019, you go, they did have guys who were kind of attacking defensive ends from defensive tackles as well. But they had Fred Warner behind, and you had Dre Greenlaw behind. So they had people behind who could kind of fill in terms of it's like you got to cover each other's backs, and I don't think they have the unit behind them that makes the difference. So they want to do one thing up front, but they don't have the quality in the second unit to enable that front unit to fully do what they want to do. Because even when you look at someone like, we'll go to free agents now, but even look at, in a minute, but you look at someone like who they're looking at, like Larry Ogunjobi, he's another guy who is a similar type of player, and so they look like they want guys who are just going to rotate and have a lot of energy and, maybe help disrupt the run while trying to get to the pass, that kind of way. But then if you're going to do that way, you need to have the linebackers to help kind of fill in the gaps when that doesn't work out, because you can't just do what you want always. The offensive line, and when you face up against good offensive lines, is what happened last year. Is that when we came up against Philadelphia, specifically with a really good offensive line and a good running game, that was really problematic because they really took advantage of our aggressive front and lackluster linebackers and safeties effectively down the middle. So those two units that we just covered in the past 2 weeks really matter a lot to what we do in this unit. And it's funny, we've gone right down the center of the defense with our kind of worst unit. So you can see that's where we are weak, and we're going to find out about it in week 1 against the Ravens. That's for sure. They're going to be projected to be one of the best running teams in the league, and we'll find out how bad, or maybe not, how much not of an issue it is in week 1, right?
Absolutely, that is a test to kind of get the season going. So it'll be interesting to see how they face up to that, and whether they kind of are able to adjust the scheme slightly. Because I think, as you said, last season we saw the scheme and kind of the get off, and what the Jets are effectively asking all 4 of the defensive linemen to do is beat your man and get 3 feet up the field, 3 yards up, 3 steps up the field, and kind of be fast off the ball. Whereas other teams who play more like contain or controlled systems, you're more trying to eat up the gaps rather than get up the field. You're more trying to make sure that you're dominating your gap, so no one can break through the gap. So your defensive tackles will be tasked with occupying that gap between the guards and the centres, and your defensive ends will be looking for the gaps between the tackles and the guards. So you're really playing that controlled system, whereas the Jets are kind of like, get up the field. And sometimes we've seen it, that leads to splash plays. You might beat your man and you'll be in the backfield as the handoff is taking place, and you're able to get that tackle for a loss, and it's good. The problem is when that gap opens up, and the linebackers and CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams, as you spoke about last week, they're not necessarily the best at getting to that gap in time. That gap opens up, and then there's a hole, and that's when a 1-yard run turns into a 6-yard, 7-yard, 8-yard run, because your linebackers are there making up that ground rather than being there to fill it in. So,
and when the safeties were playing badly, that 6-yard run becomes a 25-yard run or a 25-yard touchdown, right? That was what was happening last year. Hopefully, Jordan Whitehead is excellent against the run, and he should really help with not giving up the big play. Like Sal always says, eliminate explosives. Or hopefully, the explosives will be limited to within 10 yards, in terms of even if they break through, someone like Whitehead will be pivotal, especially if they're playing, a kind of two-man, linebacking unit with, extra DBs and Whitehead's that extra guy who can come into the box and help out there. That could be a big factor. And I think that's probably part of the plan. I think it's just against those I think it might work against quite a few of the teams. I just think against some of the better running teams, the ones who've got really good offensive lines, really good running games, and good running backs. We saw what happened against Indy. We saw what happened against Philadelphia. It comes apart a little bit when you face those really good teams, and it becomes a long day because you can't get off the field. The offense gets cold. We just don't want to see that again this year. We saw it was not good to see last year. And it's not going to help out in this year, in the second year of Zach running the offense as well. So it's kind of all these things. It's all complementary football, and we have to be better at kind of getting off the field, and that really means don't allow those 8-yard runs on first down. That's going to be key. Can we keep it to contain the run enough?
Absolutely. Kind of moving into a run scheme as opposed to looking at the interior defensive line now. But I think what you've got with
that's what it is.
Six bodies, you've got these, as we said, you've got these 3 guys at the top who are all kind of similar players: Solomon Thomas, Quinnen Williams, and Sheldon Rankins, who are these fast get off guys. They're explosive off the ball. They can get upfield, and they are perfect scheme fits. The X factor in all of this, and the guy who's like the question mark, is Jonathan Marshall, the 6th round pick from last year, and he's a really interesting player because a bit of his history. So he kind of was a kind of free tech, similar to Quinnen Williams' kind of role, where he played a free tech, kind of just outside the guard's shoulder, kind of occupying that gap. When he was at Arkansas, he was a team captain, and they had no one who could play nose tackle. They just had no one who played over the centre, and their defensive coordinator loved having someone over the centre. and kind of being that gap eating, run stuffing, block eating kind of guy. And Jonathan Marshall kind of ended up, as a team captain, volunteering to play there and kind of being that guy in the middle of the defence. And some say in that draft that's kind of hurt his draft stock because he didn't get a chance to show what he could do in his free tech role, and that's why he was viewed as more of a projection and more of someone you'd need to work on, as we saw the Jets kind of gave him basically a red shirt year. I know he got a couple of snaps, but he wasn't a prominent part of that defence, and he's kind of got a bit more experience than any of the other Jets defenders, and I'm not saying it's at an NFL level, but being that guy who sits in the middle of the line. And I just wonder if they've got hopes, because we haven't really heard the Jets speak about their kind of planned role for him at all, whether it's as a free tech kind of rolling in with Quinnen, Sheldon and Solomon, or whether he's kind of going to play this more Foley Fatukasi type role where it's first and second downs, playing as kind of a one tech and eating up those blocks and getting those tackles in. So I think he's a really interesting player to watch at the bottom of the roster, kind of what kind of role will he carve out for himself this season, and he's someone to keep an eye on. The other guys at the bottom of the roster, Nathan Shepherd and Tanzel Smart, I think we were all surprised that Nathan Shepherd got brought back. He is a disaster to some extent. Penalty machine.
Yeah.
Hasn't quite flashed. Older prospects. He's on a team minimum, so I think there's a question mark whether he's even on the 53-man roster. Yeah. And then Tanzel Smart, I'm gonna say I know nothing about Tanzel Smart and what kind of player he is.
I've seen some decent things from Smart. I've seen I've seen a few people who kind of, I've seen a little bit of stuff in terms of his play. He's okay, but he's not a guy who's going to kind of project to make a difference maker. He's a guy.
Well, I think he'd be bottom of the roster, rotational piece if anything.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And then you kind of sideswiped JFM playing interior. I do think he does come in on certain plays. Probably if we're talking about the run, he's on first, second down. He's probably going to be more on the. He'll
come into 5 tech, so I think they'll use him between 5 and 9 tech, and maybe rarely on like if it's like 3rd and 16, they might move him into 3 tech there. But
yeah,
I think the plan, and I think people's views on John Franklin Myers has skewed because there was such injuries last year across the defensive line. No one quite got to see how the Jets want to use him properly, and I think he's not going to play defensive tackle. He will certainly play defensive end and kind of play perhaps most as a 5 tech with kind of like Carl Lawson and Jermaine Johnson in that 9 tech role on the other side. So he's going to kind of eat those blocks and be that kind of closer power rusher. Yeah. Really good at setting the edge, kind of able to get his hands on people, push people backwards, and he should have an impact. But if we're talking strictly about interior defensive linemen, I don't think we can include John Franklin Myers.
Would you include him in the edge hat then when we get to it?
Yeah, he's more of an edge player, defensive end edge.
We'll see. Well, and it's interesting to see now that we've got so many options at edge. I wonder whether they do push him inside more to get him on the field as he's a quality player. What we'll see, like I say, we'll see the rotation play out as we might even see this in terms of training camp when they start to list where people are playing. When you get to training camp, you guys kind of get a feel of where these guys might line up. If we move over to kind of potential free agents, obviously Ogunjobi is the big name, and we've talked about it before. Interesting, he's another guy who's got. He's kind of just add to the trio at the top that you mentioned in terms of a guy who gets after the pass, probably not as strong against the run, but maybe another quality body in there, to kind of rotate. That's not the worst thing, especially if they want to rotate and keep people fresh. It's probably a decent idea. And I guess it's apparently they've offered him and Quan deals, and we'll see. If they come back to it, I think they're just waiting for other things to shake out. Maybe other teams to drop players. Maybe they look for the players themselves. The free agents look for other teams to offer them contracts. So we'll see how that all plays out over the summer. Is there any other people that are sitting there in the free agent pile, kind of that who you think could potentially help with this situation? Because when I look at it, I'm thinking, all these names are guys who are much more the same kind of ilk kind of player, right? There's like Richardson and Dominican Sue.
Ogunjobi is interesting, and as you said, he's kind of bringing in more of the same. So if you want another body to join that rotation because you feel like you need an extra pair of legs in there, and I think, as we said, like the drop off after Quinn Williams is severe. So he can kind of join that tier with Sheldon Rankins, and then Solomon Thomas, you're kind of betting on upside, and then who knows with the other three. I think for me, and as I kind of have alluded to and has been my theme throughout this entire conversation, run stopping is important. So I don't know if there's someone like an Eddie Goldman who's still out there unsigned, and we're frantically searching before this podcast trying to find if there was an injury or a reason that he wasn't signed. But
yeah.
So someone might tweet at us being like, what the fuck was Matt saying Eddie Goldman? But if you want to nose tackle someone who's kind of done that Foley Fatukasi type role where you sit in the middle of neat blocks and kind of take pressure off the other guys, I think he'd be worth a dart throw. Otherwise, I think you're sitting here waiting till waiver wires cuts and just waiting to see. And that is fine because it's June now. There's no need to try and force it by signing someone who's still on the market, trying to kind of force it. Play your cards, see what happens. You kind of got the bodies in place and kind of see where you go.
Yeah, I think that's the case,
the more reps that people like Jonathan Marshall, Solomon Thomas, Sheldon Rankins can get in training camp, I think that's going to do them the world of good, particularly Jonathan Marshall getting kind of his feet under the table. So I think having him there and giving him those reps will be a good thing, and I think that's what you need.
Yeah, I think it's just more reps for them. I really think that anybody that they would look at though is going to be more like in the mold of players that we currently have and just rotating them. I think that they have this ideal of what they want their defensive line to do, and I think it comes down to you really got to look at that. Look at the linebacker free agency unit to see who we can bring in there to help out with that unit. I know Quan Alexander's one, but I think that's really where it comes. If you're going to really go for that kind of attacking front, you've got to. I don't know if they're going to because even when they had Foley last year, it always seemed like a square peg round hole situation. And like they didn't really know how to use his strengths to the maximum because they wanted him to play. So it was not the best season we saw from him. I think it was. So it's interesting to look at this, and I think a lot of it will become clearer as people come in from people come in from other teams, people come in from the free agent market, people go out. We start to work out how the team is forming. But yeah, this interior is definitely worrying in terms of you just don't want to see where we just can't stop the run because that's just demoralizing when you've got such talent on certain positions like at cornerback and at edge. You want to make sure that those guys can really come not taken out of the game by not being able to stop the run. So. Yeah, it's an interesting position. I think it's definitely worthy of its position in the top 3 worst units, and it's just worrying that it's right down the centre. So hopefully they start working on it, and we kind of feel better about this when we come to September. Matt, I think we'll wrap it up for this show. Is there anything you want to say to listeners before we head out?
Just come on, you Quins, for this weekend. Enjoy it. A couple more weeks of OTAs, and then August will soon be here. Did you see? This is something. The Jets got flexed to prime time for pre-season against the Atlanta Falcons. Monday Night Football in pre-season. Put it in your diaries.
How exciting!
How excited!
Well, that's just a great happy note to finish off the show. I guess if anyone's a New York Rangers fan, you guys are in the middle of a really good series with Tampa Bay. I know David is living and dying by these games as well. So, but if anyone else is a Rangers fan, good luck to you guys. Before we, it'll be all wrapped up by the time we're back next week. So, good luck. Enjoy the sports over the weekend, whatever's around. Enjoy your weekend, and we will catch you next week.